that you've probably never heard of, and yet you should have. You've definitely heard his music. My search started after an email from listener Rob in Gosberton, which reads, "You have to play Bad Company." Local man Boz Burrell from Holbeach was the bassist. As a vocalist, he also performed with the fabulous King Crimson. Well, I was intrigued because I'd never heard of him before, but with your help, we uncovered some amazing stories.
He didn't change the way he was with his family. I felt he never bragged about him having money.
We only had each other, so we really leaned on each other a lot. We looked to each other to keep the show strong all the time, you know.
He got people at it. Nobody slept. Nobody sat down and took it easy.
Here's one of their hits for starters, Bad Company with Shooting Star.
Johnny was a schoolboy when he heard his first Beatles song. Love me do, I think it was, and from there it didn't take him long. Got himself a guitar, used to play every night. Now he's in a rock and roll outfit and everything's alright. Don't you know? Johnny told his mama, "Hey mama, I'm going away. I'm gonna hit the big time, gonna be a big star someday." Yeah. Mama came to the door with a teardrop in her eye. Johnny said, "Don't cry, mama," smiled and waved goodbye. Don't you know? Yeah, yeah. Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Don't you know? Don't you know? Don't you know that you are a shooting star? In all the world will love you just as long as you are. Johnny made a record, went straight up to #1. Suddenly everyone loved to hear him sing a song. Watching the world go by, surprising it goes so fast. Johnny looked around him and said, "Well, I made the big time at last." Don't you know? Don't you know? Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Don't you know? Whoa, yeah. Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Yeah. In all the world will love you just as long as you are a shooting star. Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Don't you know? Don't you know that you are a shooting star now? And all the world will love you just as long as you are. Johnny died one night, died in his bed. Bottle of whiskey, sleeping tablets by his head. Johnny's life passed him by like a warm summer day. If you listen to the wind, you can still hear him play. Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Don't you know? Don't you know? Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Don't you know? Don't you
Bad Company with Shooting Star, featuring Boz Burrell on the bass, from Lincolnshire. But how much do we really know about him? Well, I started digging. Raymond Burrell was born at home in Saracen's Head in 1946 and registered at Holbeach Hospital. Known as Boz to his friends, he went on to become the lead singer in King Crimson in 1971 and later played bass as a founding member of Bad Company, a crucial part of their most successful lineup from 1973, leaving the band for good in 1999. And that's about all you can find online. Not much has been written about this enigmatic bassist, and there's almost nothing about his time in Lincolnshire. So I put out the call to see if anyone had known Boz Burrell. Jeff Cooper was the first person to email me back, so I gave him a call.
Hello?
Oh, hi, is that Jeff?
It is.
So basically, I've been looking into Boz Burrell and his life, and it says born in Holbeach, and then that's kind of it. Did you cross paths at school or anything?
Yes, you were. Obviously, I think he was, his birthday and my birthday fell. He was perhaps 2 years in front of me.
I see.
At junior school, when we were there were only 3 classes for, all the, from starting at 5 until you went to the secondary school.
Yeah.
So you got perhaps 2 or 3 years of people in the same class. And, for some of the time we were both in the same class, and he was sat in the row to the right of me, because the older you got, the nearer you got to the right-hand side of the room.
And do you remember much about him and what he was like, or are we going too far back for you to remember?
He did, I think, one of the first people I can remember to play the air guitar. Even I can remember at school he would be, using something or nothing for a guitar and playing.
Yeah, so he was into music, clearly, even at that age.
Even at that age, yeah.
Thank you, Jeff, who knew Boz Burrell from Wapload Saracen's Head County Primary School. What about secondary school? Here's Keith Green.
We both went on to the George Farmer Secondary School. We're in the same form. Boz, myself, Bernard Rudd, as you might know.
Yeah.
Basically, we all started to learn guitar with a music teacher, and he was called Mr. Miles, learning sort of 3 chords as you did in those days. And eventually, we started to play at various concerts. We did play at sort of old people's homes and things like that. At that time, we called ourselves the Saints,
Right.
which was more or less a skiffle sort of group. Well, Boz played a tea chest in that band, very appropriate for his bass guitar he played later on, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We were all sort of good friends and had a lot of fun with it, really. This was this is the basic thing. He was just an ordinary person, really. I mean, he wasn't outstanding properly in those days. It all seemed to come on from the Tea Time 4. I mean, I went to watch the Tea Time 4 to the Starlight Room in Boston, and they were very, very good indeed. And that was in the early days. But I was quite surprised how well they'd sort of come on from the early days of school,
Thanks, Keith. So the Tea Time 4, this is where Bernie Rudd comes in, who we heard Keith mention. He first met Boz at the George Farmer School in Holbeach, and they also went to King's Lynn Tech together, which is where the band formed.
I guess we were just drawn to each other, just 2 schoolboys who took a liking to each other, and I had a guitar before he did. For about 2 weeks before he did. His mother was friends with my mother, and so she got Raymond, we'll call Boss Raymond, because that was his name. Got him a guitar, and we both learned together, really.
What was it like just jamming in those early days?
Well, to begin with, I sang, not him, and we swapped over. I said to him one day, why don't you give it a try? And he said, yeah, okay. And he loved it, whereas I didn't like to sing. I still don't to this day. I can sing, but I don't like to sing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to play my guitar and stand in the background. And Boz, was a bit more outgoing. He's a guy who liked to be in the front, and it went down very well. We enjoyed it. We had one tiny little amplifier. We'd put that in my mother's shopping basket, and off we'd go, 2 boys on bikes, and we'd turn up that way and plug in both through one tiny little amplifier.
There came a point where you and Boz kind of split away from each other just because of logistics, and, I think he wanted to do it quite seriously and to try and go for the big time, but obviously that comes at a price.
I fell out with our management when the band began to outgrow sort of Kingsley and we moved to London, Jack was still a manager. I didn't think very much of his ability, and I argued with him, and I said to Boz, what's going to happen? He said, I'm going to stay here and see if I can take it further.
Bernie Rudd. After continuing to search for people who knew the bass player, I received a message from Irene Kennedy. Boz was her uncle.
Well, it was a pretty close-knit family anyway. From as far back as I can remember, Boz and his sister and mum and dad lived with my grandparents. We went on holiday together. He was more like a brother, really, I suppose, rather than cousins, It was quite close. I can remember at an early age, I was probably 10 or 11, we actually went to a dance at King's Lynn. I think it was King's Lynn Corn Exchange. His group were playing there, so we went for the evening. I could see, he was going to be, say famous in that sort of genre of music, and with it being my cousin, I suppose I was proud to be associated with him. I do play a lot of Bad Company, and I think my favourite is Silver, Blue and Gold. And why that was never released as a single, I would never know. I think it would have been a hit if it was.
In the beginning, I believed every word that you said. Now that you're gone, my world is in shreds. Oh, you loved me and left me. You took all the things that I needed so bad. I'm standing here wondering, where is the love that I had? Oh, give me silver, blue and gold, the color of the sky and tone. My rainbow is overdue. In the beginning, there was something of love that was mine. Now that it's gone, I'm crying. Oh, the time that it takes for a love to grow cold is a wonder to me. I'm walking around with my head hanging down. Tell me, where is she?
the beautiful Silver, Blue and Gold from Bad Company. In 1971, Boz Burrell joined King Crimson, who were already very well respected as a band, and at that time they performed around London. Brian Greene got to know Boz in the capital.
I was at university in London, and I used to go down to Marquee a lot, and the manager down there, he mentioned that there was a lad from Lincolnshire who he knew came in sometimes, and I bumped into him one night in the Marquee. Then I bumped into him a few more times, and we'd have a drink, you know, and then about a year later I bumped into him in Spalding. He'd come back to see his parents. We started mating around a bit, and then I had a business in Spalding. I used to then get phone calls in the week from him saying, I'm playing with Stevie Marriott at the weekend. Are you coming down? And then after a few months, the phone calls used to be, what time are you coming down on Friday? Because
No question.
I need to go to the Marquee. and the friendship developed. He was living with Mike Pato when I first met him in London. I mean, they were maniacs, all of them. Well, you had to be adventurous to go out with them, let's put it like that.
Yes, I can imagine.
It was a bit like an Olympic sport rather than...
Wow.
He was always last to bed, Boz was. Pure devilish. Do you know, if you went anywhere, if it was daytime, he would always have a cup of tea. If somebody said, do you want a drink, Boz? Cup of tea, please. Cup of tea. My mother, cup of tea, please, Mrs. Green. That was in the daytime. He got people at it. He really did. Nobody slept. Nobody sat down and took it easy.
Yeah.
The place was just a hive of musicians, you know. There was Mitch Mitchell and Polly Palmer, who used to be with Family. They were in the basement all the time in the recording studio out there. Brian from Thin Lizzy, who used to turn up. You know, and it was always music, and he loved music. He lived for music. He used to practice like mad. He was serious, but he did it all with a smile, you know. I mean, all that business of going through the learning the bass with Bob Fripp in Crimson, it was an incredible period, really. I saw him the first time he ever played with King Crimson at the Marquee, and we sat in the dressing room afterwards, and he looked at me and he said, come on, you know, what do you make of that? You know, he didn't even know whether he'd done it or not, but I mean, he picked it up pretty well. Obviously, he's a Lincolnshire lad.
Yeah.
When we was in America, if we was out and about, people used to ask him where he came from, and he always used to say, I'm from the Wash Delta. You play better blues if you live in a delta.
It sounds good to say you're from a delta, doesn't it? It's the done thing.
Yeah, never forget that.
Brian Greene there, who knew Boz Burrell during his extremely experimental phase with King Crimson. He provided lead vocals for their album Islands, released in 1971. And here's an extract of the title track. King Crimson with Islands, featuring Boz Burrell on lead vocals. In 1973, Boz joined Bad Company and hit the big time. Their first three albums, Bad Company, Straight Shooter and Run with the Pack, got to the top 5 in both America and the UK. They've had a run of hits including Good Lovin' Gone Bad, Rock and Roll Fantasy and Can't Get Enough of Your Love, featuring my favourite chromatic bass line, provided by Boz.
Well, I'll take whatever I want, and baby, I want you. You give me something I need. Now tell me I got something for you.
Bad Company with Can't Get Enough of Your Love. Martha Burrell is Boz's niece and remembers him fondly.
I only remember Boz probably when I was about 7 or 8.
Okay, so it was quite early in your life.
Yeah. I lived with my nan for a very long time because my mum worked away.
Okay.
And I just remember Boz obviously coming home at Christmas or when he brought the band back, raiding Nan's fridge. And they used to sort of jam in her big hallway she used to have. He used to come back home quite a lot and play in the pub.
Interesting.
I want to say the Checkers. He used to have a really clapped out big Volvo that he used to drive around with all his band stuff in it because he said that he wouldn't waste money on a posh car. Literally, he used to wear Bermuda shorts, a white sort of vest top and Nike Air Max high top trainers.
But and he was doing quite well at this point in terms of he'd hit the big time, you know. He'd sold a lot of records.
Yeah, he hated suit shirts. If you had to wear them, well, that was I think it was literally if you had to go to a funeral.
What was he like at that time? It sounds like he was a bit of a character. That's what everybody tells me.
He was full of life. Yeah, I remember once he bought me this really cool sleeping bag and he put me in it and dragged me around the bungalow. Those are the sort of things he did. And then I must have been about 18 and I moved to Surrey for a job. He was obviously London.
Yeah.
And I remember that I wasn't very well and it was snowing and he literally got from his house to pick me up because I was so poorly. I never went back to that job, but I lived with him for about 9 months.
What, in London?
In London. So he just looked after me.
What was that time like when you were there?
It was amazing. His house, all I remember was that it was always white and black marble, and he had this gorgeous big black marble fireplace. And his little courtyard garden, it had grapevines in it, but he was just lovely. The only thing I would say, what I would know of that he loved spending money on was kites.
Kites?
He used to get these massive kites that did loop the loop, and he would go down onto the beach, and he used to have I'm going to call it a beach buggy. It was attached to the kite, and I just remember him getting it one time, and he crashed it. He went flying down Cromer Beach when the tide was out, and he crashed it.
Do you ever feel because you knew him when you were quite young, obviously, but did fame change him in any way?
I don't think it did at all. I think a lot of people can have different opinions and say, yes, it did, but he didn't change the way he was with his family.
Yeah, and that says a lot.
And I felt he never bragged about him having money at all. You wouldn't know he had money.
But that's good. I love that, though. That's being down to earth, isn't it?
Yeah. He was still Boz. And I called him Boz. I never called him Raymond. He was always called Raymond if he'd done something, and that was, his mum shouting at him, standing on a chair shouting at him.
You get the first name treatment.
Yeah. I'm going to say I probably knew more of the person, but the only one and I never can remember the name of it, and that sounds how it's so bad. I forgot the records under the bed, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the one with the green background, and it's got 2 dices on it. The red dices.
Well, that album is Straight Shooter, and this is probably Bad Company's most famous record from that album, Feel Like Making Love.
Baby, when I think about you, I think about love. Darling, I don't live without you and your love. If I had those golden dreams of my yesterday, I would wrap you in the heaven, but really dying on the way. Feel like making love. Feel like making love. Feel like making love. Feel like making love to you. Baby, if I think about you, I think about love. Darling, if if I live without you, I live without love. And if I had the sun and moon, and they were shining, I would give you both night and day, love satisfied.
Bad Company with Feel Like Making Love. They clearly had a lot of fun making music in the studio, as you can hear from this outtake.
I missed the hi-hat out, actually. Right. Yeah, when you do that hi-hat side, it doesn't have to be so hard, you know? Yeah. Just has to be like tick, 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 you know? Yeah. Shut up, dog! Hey? Dog's barking. Yeah, I thought I heard a dog as well. Hang on, boss. Hang on. There it is, there.
The original lineup of Bad Company was Boz Burrell on the bass, Paul Rodgers on vocals, Mick Ralphs on guitar, and Simon Kirke on drums. So let's hear from Simon. How did he meet Boz?
Boz was a real charming rascal. He was a quite a character, a real character, and we all loved him. But the first time we ran into him was when Bad Company was auditioning bass players, and we had a whole list that we sort of went through one by one. And the reason Boz was at the bottom was that, quite honestly, none of us were huge fans of King Crimson. I don't know how his name got in the mix, but at that time, you know, Bad Company, we weren't really even a band, but we were sort of anti-glitter and glam, and King Crimson we thought were a bit pretentious, and it just wasn't our cup of tea. And the fact that Boz had been in the band, we didn't realise he'd only been in the band for about a year. It sort of put him at the bottom of the list. So long story short, we sort of went through 15 bass players. None of them really came up to scratch. And so we called, or the office called Boz and had him come down to a rehearsal space in the King's Road in London. And he walked in. He was great. He was a great-looking guy. He had a fringe jacket and beard and a charming guy. And we were a little bit, wondering what he would come up with, because we'd found out he'd only been playing bass for about a year. And the fact that he'd been in King Crimson, whose musical skills were legendary, really intrigued us as to how good he was. But before we did anything, he said, right, let's all go down the pub.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, we thought, oh, okay. So we did. We dutifully went to some pub that was a few doors away and came back thinking, who is it? Because wherever we went, in the street or in the pub, everyone knew him. Hello, boss. Hello, mate. All right, yeah. And we said, who is this guy? So anyway, we got back down into the rehearsal space, and he donned his bass, and I sat behind the kit, and Paul Rodgers chose a song, and Mick Ralph said, well, Boz, it starts in G and it goes to C, and Boz said, no, I don't bother with all that. Just play it and I'll pick it up. Wow. And that really got my attention. I thought, that's pretty bloody good. And that's where, it sort of took off. In fact, the bass that he started on was the most appallingly difficult bass you could imagine to play. It's called an Ampeg scroll neck, and it's fretless.
I've seen it.
Number one, the Ampeg scroll neck is a bit like a piano leg with 4 strings on it. It's a beast. And without frets, I couldn't believe it when he started playing it. He was actually really pretty damn good. He seemed to want to jump in to bass playing with both feet. And he had this great musical, he was a singer. That his first band was Boz and the Boz People. Mm. They must have been up all night thinking of that title for a band, but that's what, and he was the singer. How on earth he ended up playing bass with King Crimson is a mystery to me to this day. But he had a lovely musicality to him, and he was very endearing, and he was very quick to learn, Chris. He did pick things up very quickly.
I just wonder if being a singer does help, if you can translate that kind of inner voice to melody. And I know it's different for when you're playing rhythm and stuff, but if you hear it in your head and you think, well, eventually I'll get it out of my fingers, I just wonder if that might have lent to his playing style.
Well, ask Paul Rodgers, because Paul Rodgers is a wonderful bass player.
Yeah.
And he wrote quite a few songs on bass. And I would go along with that. Boz was a good singer. Not a spectacular singer, not like Paul, but he had a wonderful way of harmonizing and viewing the overall picture of how a song would feel. The fact that me and him were pretty close in years, in birthday, we were both sort of Leos and outgoing, and we hung out quite a lot together. He was a couple of years older than me, but we got along really, really well. And if you get along with someone, the music just seems to fall into place, And we were very close friends within a year. I liked him very much. He had a certain presence. When he got sort of inhabited by the groove, he was. I don't know if you remember Baloo the bear in the Jungle Book.
Absolutely.
He was like that. He would get all, ooh, and like he was sort of scratching his back on a post. He was like, oh man, and he'd get right down and he'd get so into it. It was really very, very funny. But he never leapt about the stage. In fact, he was a fisherman. He loved to fish. And when we lived in Malibu for a while, he'd be out there. We'd be up all night on various substances, and we'd look out and on the beach, and there he was, sort of propped up with this huge fishing pole, and he'd be sitting on one of those shooting sticks, and there he was, and that was Boz. he had amazing balance for someone who liked to drink. And he was just, I wish he was around today. He was just the most amazing character. I miss him.
Simon Kirke, founding member of Bad Company, who was also in Free with the legendary singer Paul Rodgers. So what does Paul Rodgers remember about meeting Boz Burrell of Lincolnshire for the first time?
We were auditioning bass players. Mick and I had got together and we were writing songs, and then we drew in Simon Kirke.
Yeah.
So all we needed was a bass player at that point, and then we were trying out. We tried about 8 bass players. It was getting ridiculous, actually. And they were too tall, or they were too small, or they were too something or other, and we just couldn't settle. And then Boz came along.
Yeah.
And all I knew about him at that point was that he was a bass player, and he had started life as a singer, and he was had a band called Boz and the Boz People.
Yeah, unusual name.
So so he came along, and we had a number of songs. We had the song Bad Company, and we played that, and he just was... I think being a singer, it made him a very melodious, if I can say that, bass player. It wasn't just bump ba dum ba dum ba dum bump bump. It was like, it's company, and it was do 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 do. It was almost playing lead on the bass.
Yeah.
And we looked a bit askance at him and thought, what's he? But you know what? It worked very well, and it just clicked together when Boz finally showed up and he was the bass player. Everything just went very swimmingly from then on. We had it all together.
Can I ask you about that? Because I know that you do play a bit of bass, actually. Simon was telling me that you're quite lyrical in your own bass playing, and it might... I don't know if there's some kind of crossover between people who can sing, as Boz, obviously could with his King Crimson stuff, and actually being able to play the bass. Do you think there is some kind of crossover?
Possibly. For me, all of the instruments, a person who plays the bass, he sings on the bass. The person who plays the keyboards, that's his voice. And the plays a guitarist, that's his voice. You know what I mean? So we're all kind of speaking to each other. We're all singing to each other via our instruments. It's a communication thing. But yeah, I did start. I started life playing bass, and I remember playing. Well, I played the bass on Seagull. And Boz looked at me a little bit askance at that, and I said, well, it's just this one,
Just let me have one.
Yeah, I know. And he was great about it, actually. But I think it is, music is, it comes out of you, whatever you play, I think, whatever instrument you do, that's your voice, yeah.
But I guess on the road as well, he was a lot of fun. I hear stories all the time about, he was into flying kites, he was into going to the beach and stuff. He was into loads of things.
Oh, he was. Yeah, he liked to fish as well. We used to fish off Malibu Beach, and I remember fishing with him one day, and we cast the lines out standing on the beach, and the line just rocketed out. And we couldn't. I hadn't fished before. I thought, what is this? What's going on here? We put it back in, and we had about 6 fish on all these hooks, And we had a fantastic breakfast. It was. It was great.
That life on the road. I just want to, give us an insight into it, because you'll know him. He would have become extremely close to you. You probably know him better than most people, even the people he grew up with, because you shared some of those times with him.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we got to know each other almost too well, I think, sometimes. But we had a great time, and Boz was always a lot of fun. I remember when we recorded at Clearwell Castle, we recorded, after we'd done the Bad Cool album at Headley Grange, that really worked. It was very organic. We were all in the same house. We were all sleeping. We got up, we made breakfast, and somebody wandered in and started playing the guitar, and somebody joined him on the drums. And it was just like that. So we thought, well, it would be nice to be able to do that in a castle. So we went and did that in Clearwell Castle in Gloucestershire, there in the heart of the country. And they used to run medieval nights, because it was a medieval thing, and they drank mead, and they ate pork, and they toasted each other. And that was in another part of the castle, and we were, strictly speaking, not allowed to go in there, because they were private dues, if you like, Yeah. So we were in another part. And Boz went missing one day, and I thought, where the heck is the bass player? I searched the castle, and I thought, I heard all this, noise going on, excitement and revelry. And who was in the middle of it but dear Boz?
Yeah.
I had to drag him out and say, come on, mate, we've got to play bass.
Yeah.
You do, anyway.
It's just, I love watching watching some of the classic performances, even the more recent ones before he, sadly left us. And from a young age, what I hear from his friends was that, he took it quite seriously as well. So there was fun, but there was like a serious musical side, and his writing was quite serious as well.
Yes, he did regard himself as a little bit above this rock music. He was a jazz player, and it was a little bit beneath him to be playing rock music, but he did it so well.
Yeah.
And he wanted to write songs. He was desperate to write a song, and he came up with one, Gone, 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 which is still in the set to this day, and it's a really good song.
Yeah.
And that it sums him up in lots of ways. The lyric, the story of the lyric, if you listen to that, she's gone, gone, gone. I don't know if I'm happy. I don't know if I'm sad. She's gone, gone. I don't know if I'll cry. I don't know if I'll die. Laughing, That was typical of Dear Boz.
Yeah.
And it's a great song.
What would you say he would be the best remembered for? And, is it that character that he had?
Well, for me, I always remember he's a superb bass player. There was a lot of personality too, and he did like to have a good time, as we all did back in the day there, But, he was very serious about his music, and he did take the job, if you like, very seriously. And what it was a thing of communication. When we went on the stage, when we hit it big, if you like, there was only the four of us, and sometimes it was strange to realize there was only four of us on that stage in front of 20,000 people, and we only had each other, so we really leaned on each other a lot. We looked to each other to keep the show strong all the time, and we depended on each other very much, so we were very close.
Forever. It ain't the first time, baby. Baby, it won't be the last. I better get the boys round and do some drinking fast. 'Cause she's gone, gone, gone. I don't know if I'm happy. I don't know if I'm sad. She's gone. Smile. I'm gonna miss you stealing all my booze and talking all the while. I'm gonna miss you cleaning around the home and helping with my blues. I think I'll get myself a maid and take her on a cruise. Yeah.
Bad Company with Gone, 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 written by Boz Burrell, and Bad Company still perform that song on stage to this day. Thank you to Paul Rogers for sparing some time to talk about Boz. Well, Boz left Bad Company a few times, quitting for good in 1999. But what did he do after that? Well, the music never stopped. Zoot Money, famous for his big roll band in the 1960s, knew Boz Burrell for most of his life and played with him after he left Bad Company.
We first met at the Orford Jazz Cellar, and we just started talking, and that started a lifelong, friendship. Incredible. Almost over 50 years that we've known each other.
I mean, I can't even imagine what it was like when he left, when he left us all. It must have been just, I suppose he was a big hole.
Yeah, big. Well, I did know that he was ill in Spain and stuff, and that really was the best place for him, really, because they took care of him quite well in that hospital. He was addicted to the sun, fishing, jumping about on his kite, and we played games. We would play games in competition with each other, and the scoring wouldn't be money or thing. We would be allowed to insult the other person. The banter could get more vicious. That was the payment. We played for banter.
I love it.
Sounds stupid, but it was really, really some wonderful nights. Mike, me, and a few other musicians, around at Boz's place until God knows what time, and coming out when it was dawn. We got used to that through the rock and roll lifestyle of nighttime was sort of a way to where you unloaded all your daytime aggravation, basically, and nobody else wanted to be up, so you'd be up together during the night. And we're not talking about it being necessarily a party. It was just being in each other's company.
Yeah.
He was excellent company, kind heart, with a no-nonsense edge. And, if he could help, he would help.
Zoot Money sharing his memories of Boz Burrell. Boz died of a heart attack in Spain on the 21st of September 2006 at the age of 60. He was a huge loss to the world of music and to those who knew and loved him. He's survived by his wife Kathy, to whom we send all of our love. There's a memorial to Boz Burrell in Edinburgh, where he spent some of his happiest days. It can be found just outside the Malmaison Hotel in Leith. Black stones spiral around to form a bass clef, and in the middle, a plaque, which reads, "It doesn't get any better than this."
Destiny is a rising sun. Oh, I was born, 6 gun in my hand, behind a gun, I make my final stand. That's why they call me Bad Company, and I can't deny Bad Company till the day I die. Till the day I die. Till the day I die. Rebel souls, deserters we are called. Chose a gun and threw away the sword. Now these towns, they all know our name. 6 gun sound is our
to Boz Burrell was produced and presented by Chris Barrow, with thanks to Bernie Rudd, Brian Green, Jeff Cooper, Irene Kennedy, John Halsey, Keith Green, Martha Burrell, Paul Rogers, Simon Kirk, Steve Loads and Zoot Money.
Tetney, Mablethorpe and Borough La Marsh.